And we're live. Let's make sure everything's good and stable really quick. I think we're good. Mile high, hello everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. My name is Lance Sanderson, feeling a lot better today than I was yesterday. Joining me as always is my good friend and colleague. He is your Denver Broncos insider and Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, Erick Trickel. Erick, what's going on, man? How are we doing today?
Doing pretty good. My office isn't as cold as it was yesterday, which makes it nice. But I forgot to actually put socks on, so my feet are actually a little bit cold. But I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be doing this now twice a week and talking about the Broncos and getting the chance to do this and just answer all the questions that we get. Because part of my thing, that one reason why I advocated for doing a second show is I felt bad. Like, we get a lot of questions that we aren't able to answer on Friday nights, and having the second show has given you guys a chance to come in again, ask your guys' questions again, and hopefully we were able to get into it this time. Of course, there's still questions we're not going to be able to get to, but it makes it a little bit more likely we'll be able to catch your question. So just excited for that, and just glad you guys are here to join us and just interact. I love doing this.
These shows are so much fun, and being able to talk with all of Broncos country and get, some of your opinions out there, and then kind of just have an open conversation with everybody. When we do the recorded shows, it does get kind of stale sometimes. You and I agree on a lot of stuff, and it does, to incorporate some new opinions and stuff like that, and then to kind of have a live conversation with everybody. It's great. We really enjoy doing this, and the with everything that's going on, the pro days ongoing, and the combine just wrapped up. The draft is heating up. This is our time of the year. This is what we do. This is what we do best at Mile High Huddle, is provide the top quality NFL draft coverage for all of our Denver Broncos fans. Now, today, we're not going to go really kind of into the draft a little bit. We're going to talk more specifically in free agency, which is right around the corner. The legal tampering period starts, the 16th or 17th with free agency opening on the 18th. So there's some interesting players available this year, and we really kind of wanted to go in a direction of some news that broke earlier this week with the Broncos acquiring cornerback AJ Bouye from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the way that this all kind of shook out was when the Broncos traded Emmanuel Sanders to the San Francisco 49ers earlier this last season. They acquired a third and a fourth round pick. Now, they sent the fourth round pick for they sent the fourth round pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars that they got in the San Francisco 49ers trade for Emmanuel Sanders. So essentially what they did was they turned Emmanuel Sanders into a third round pick and AJ Bouye. Now, that's a very good value. And with AJ Bouye and the track record that he has had as a cornerback in the NFL over the past couple of seasons, he's been a very good player. Last year, kind of a down year. Now, Erick, I want kind of your opinion. How does he fit in Vic Fangio's scheme? I know he's a very good tackler. He's very smooth in zone coverage, and he attacks the ball very well, and he gets his hands on a lot of footballs. What really does he bring to this defense that could set it kind of apart from what we saw last year?
Well, as long as he's able to bounce back, 2019 was a rough year for him. He was a little bit banged up, and then just the whole Jaguars defense kind of took a step back. So hopefully he's able to bounce back and kind of play at that level he did 2 years ago in 2017 and 2018, where he was actually one of the best corners in the NFL. That's the biggest thing, is that you want him to bounce back. But as for the scheme and how it'd be able to help him out, is the Vic Fangio scheme takes a little bit of pressure off of the cornerbacks because of the amount of help that they're able to get from the safeties and the linebackers with the underneath and over the top stuff. So that's going to be a little bit off of his shoulders. That might be able to help him bounce back a little bit. But the physical play that he brings, of course, is just goes without saying. Very physical guy at the against the run. He's very physical throughout the routes, just trying to disrupt players' routes, and very physical at the catch point. So that's something that Vic Fangio likes to have in his defense. But he's very smart. He is a high intellect cornerback that is good at reading the plays, and especially with, this is a big thing with zone, is being able to read the routes and jumping the routes, reading the quarterback and jumping the quarterback's eyes, stuff like that. And he brings that ability as well. And it's actually interesting with AJ Bouye is that the Denver Broncos, they were interested in him a couple years ago. They kind of had a little bit of an internal conversation, and I think they may have actually called as well with the Houston Texans about his availability during a trade. Then that following year, he went into the free agent market. Denver had some interest there as well, and so did the Chicago Bears with Vic Fangio. So this is a player that both the head coach and the team have wanted and desired to have for a few years now. So being able to get that to happen for just a fourth round pick is just tremendous. So
Yeah,
it's a great value, man.
well, and that's why it's a big reason as to why AJ Bouye was a hot commodity on the free agent market when he left the Houston Texans a few years ago. Was just the stellar play that he has had, and as you said, he's turned into a very good top quality, top 15, maybe top 10 kind of a player at the cornerback position in the NFL. He's a very good player. So now we're going to go to the super chat really quick. David Cromwell coming in and correcting me. The 16th at noon is when at noon Eastern, is when the legal tampering period starts for the for free agency. So David, we do appreciate you and we thank you for joining us today. Now to kind of continue on with the discussion as far as free agency goes, there's a lot of very interesting players, and there's one that everybody knows, and it's a guy that has played in Vic Fangio's scheme at Chicago, had a lot of success, very solid tackler, very good cover guy as well, and Prince Amukamara. Now that's an obvious connection. So, I mean, what kind of value in a contract sense would you really kind of want to give Prince Amukamara should he want to come to play in Denver?
Basically, I'd be looking at maybe a 2 or 3 year deal with with all the guaranteed money in year one, because with him going to be 31 years old at the start of the season, we're not sure what is going to happen. He did have a little bit of a step back year in 2019, but 2018 was a year in Vic Fangio's defense that he was one of the better corners in the NFL. So maybe getting back, he's able to bounce back. So that's why, like, a 3-year deal with an option after year one, basically 3 1-year options on this deal with very little guaranteed money, being able to pick up the options and guaranteeing him money might be something to get it done with something about like $8 million for year one. I think with that being not all fully guaranteed, but most of it being guaranteed, just see what he can bring. But another player that we often don't hear about, and he's kind of a guy who can be one of those hybrid type players in Vic Fangio's defense. And it's also going with that connection that Vic Fangio has with the Chicago Bears. And that's Devante Bush. He can come down and he can play the nickel. He can play in the back deep. He can play outside in the boundary a little bit as well. And he's a guy who, again, in 2018 in the Vic Fangio defense, he actually had a very solid year. And I'm not sure if it was for injury or just bad play. I actually can't remember off the top of my head. But Devante Bush actually hardly played this last season. I think he only played like 58 total snaps. So definitely some concern there with the Chicago Bears and that Chuck Pagano defense. But that would be a cheap option that Denver could look at to bring in and add more competition for it.
Kind of like a cheaper short-term deal, 1 year, $5-6 million, something like that, to come in and just compete. Now, with the Broncos already having Devante Busby not really in tow, they've decided not to extend him a restricted free agent tender. So with Devante Busby, is there any news with him? I know the Broncos they expressed an interest in bringing him back. Is there anything in the works that you know of going on up in Dove Valley as far as Devante Busby is concerned?
Well, there's a big issue with a lot of fans that Denver decided not to tender Devante Busby for an original round tender, which I understand. But that original round tender would have paid him $2.1 million this year. And with the little playing time he had, the serious injury, that was just a little bit too much money to invest in him. They'll probably work on something, probably about $1 million for the year, 1.5, somewhere around there. And there's actually a couple things that I wanted to just address in the comment section, just real quick before we just to stray off topic a little bit. Donnie Rowe asks, so these are the guys who put Justin in front of every headline. Actually, we are not. We don't have control over that stuff. Just to make that clear. And then David Stearman earlier asked, who are you guys? Well, I am Erick Trickel. I am the senior draft analyst with Mile High Huddle, as well as the Denver Broncos insider with milehighhuddle.com. Lance Sanderson, he is actually the host of this show. He's a good friend, evaluator, analyst at Mile High Huddle as well. So that's who we are.
Yes, that is exactly who we are. We are the Dove Valley Deep Divers, guys. Now, Stu McPeak coming in. Good to see you, Stu, man. We appreciate you. $10 donation. As always, thank you, sir. We do appreciate you very much, man. Now, to continue on with the free agent cornerbacks, there's a guy that's available, 29 years old, played 99% of the snaps last year for the Tennessee Titans. And I know that there's been some kind of discussion going on between you and our colleague Nick Kendall as far as if he would be a guy that you would be interested in bringing in for the Denver Broncos this year, and Logan Ryan. What do you think?
Well, the only good thing that Logan Ryan brings to the table is the amount of interceptions he had. I think he was had 6 and was one of the top or the top cornerback for interceptions. I can't remember which. But this is a guy who he allowed almost 1,000 yards receiving to his receivers, allowed one of the highest NFL ratings when targeted, allowed one of the higher catch rates when targeted, just struggled. I mean, in coverage, yes, he had some big plays, but for every big play he had, he was giving up 3 or 4 big plays. That's a big issue there. So
yeah, that's
him.
That's a fair point. He did have a really off year, and as you said, but right before we got going, there really is kind of no reason for him to have those struggles that he did this year. That defense was very good. Now with AJ Bouye, they did trade away Jalen Ramsey in the middle of the season. The Telvin Smith, I believe it is, and Miles Jack, the other linebacker, they took a step back in that defense last year. So there's a kind of Bouye was really quote on an island, more or less, by himself in that defense. They had a pretty decent pass rush as well. But speaking about that Jacksonville defense, there's another player that the Broncos are potentially interested in as far as a trade goes. Do you have anything that you can, give to us on that?
So basically, when you're looking at this, is that Denver is actually making other calls around the trade market. I made a comment not long after AJ Bouye, who, just toot my own horn here, since there's somebody in there making a comment about me being an insider, is I actually had Denver looking at a trade for AJ Bouye back in January before anybody else did. I also had Denver trading for Joe Flacco back in January last year. I have had my misses on it, but yes, I am an insider for MileHighHuddle.com. So anyways, with this is Denver is looking at other trade options, and who is a little bit harder to place because there are a lot of names being thrown out there that are available via trade. I mean, we've had Odell Beckham Jr. being speculated, although that seems not as likely. It seems like the new coaching staff there in Cleveland wants to keep him around. There's been names like Stephon Diggs that a lot of Bronco fans, because I made a comment about, as I said on Twitter, I made a comment about how Denver's wouldn't surprise me if Denver made another trade. Stephon Diggs was a name that often came up about it. I don't see Denver going that route either. But Calais Campbell of Jacksonville, that's the guy that I can definitely see Denver exploring the trade with. Maybe Akeem Hicks out of Chicago. There's been a lot of rumors going around coming out of Chicago that Chuck Pagano's defense and Chuck Pagano as himself aren't the biggest fans of Akeem Hicks and his fit within that defensive front. So that is something to keep an eye out on, or an ear out for, just to see what happens there. But the one big name I think is definitely Calais Campbell. As every Bronco fans know, that Denver almost signed him a couple years ago when he decided to sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's from the area. Denver decided to offer him some money, but Jacksonville offered him a little bit more and decided to go that route instead. Plus, there's the whole tax thing that you have to factor in as well. That may very well have had a part to play in Calais Campbell spurning Denver to go to Jacksonville.
Yeah, and that's a fair assessment. I mean, I believe it was like a $500,000 difference or something like that. And what I had read on another website had said that his agent had convinced him to take the money because $500,000 a year is a lot of money. He actually wanted to go to Denver that year, and now there's an opportunity if Denver does want to reach out that branch and say, hey, we'll shoot you another pick for a Calais Campbell to bring him in. And I mean, the contract isn't terrible for a player of his stature. He is a very good player on the defensive line. And go ahead, Eric. Excuse me.
That contract that Calais Campbell has is actually very fair with what he's going to get, is because when you look at some of these other defensive linemen that are available on the open market, a lot of these guys are going to be looking at getting $18 million plus a year. And here you are, Denver has a chance to get Calais Campbell for only $15 million. Yes, he's a little bit older. I think he's 33 or going to be 33 years old, but he is still playing at a high level. He was one of the best interior defensive linemen this last season on a defense that was just struggling. So being able to pair him with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb for I think the 2 years he has left on it, while you're using that time to develop Draymond Jones, who getting Calais Campbell to work with Draymond Jones would be tremendous. Absolutely. And whoever else the Broncos bring in just would be tremendous. So Calais Campbell at that $15 million for this year at least, and I can't remember what it is for the next season. But man, it would be a huge get for the Broncos. So it would be very understandable if they were looking that way.
So just out of curiosity, before we get to some of these questions we've got flowing in at a rampant pace right now, what kind of value would you give up for somebody like a Calais Campbell? Are you talking maybe a 5th round pick?
I would call them, and I would start my conversations around a 5th round pick. That depending on what happens from there, I might be willing to go up to a 4th round pick, but I wouldn't go higher than that. It's just there's a lot of talent that's set to be free agents this year in the defensive line class that I wouldn't be giving up a 3rd for. No way. With the age, while his contract is a value, at that age, it's still a bit of a risk that you're giving up such a young player in the top 100 in a very strong class. It's just a concern for me. So I wouldn't be going that far. I'd start with offering a 5th, move up to a 4th, seeing if that can get done. If not, I'm moving on. I'm targeting some of these defensive linemen that are going to be hitting the free agent market, guys like Javon Hargrave. I mean, Denver's been linked to DJ Reader. There's Malik Collins out of Dallas, who's a very good interior guy that can help bring pressure. Eric Armstead, if San Francisco isn't able to get a deal done with him. Chris Jones is expected to be franchise tag, so obviously he's off the list for that. But yeah, there's plenty of names that Denver can go look at on the free agent market to where you don't have to give up that 3rd round pick.
Well, and not only on the free agent market, but potentially at number 15 overall, say a guy like Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina falls to the Broncos there. Now, guys, we're going to get to some of your questions here. There was a lot of really good ones up at the top, so just give me a second to scroll back up here and see what we've got here.
Yes, they would dominate. That's one big reason why I would absolutely love that to happen. I mean, even if you don't bring Wolf back, just adding Jones in that place, you still are having a guy who can be able to just dominate up front.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a name that I don't recognize, so I'm going to see what you got here. What's your feel on Dante Olsen?
So actually, this is actually really cool. I learned this about after the combine. A guy that a follower of Mile Huddle and lives in Missoula, Montana, where Montana University is, the Grizzlies.
Yep.
Dante Olsen is a linebacker from there. Well, he only put up 15 reps on the bench press at the combine, and a lot of people were giving him a bunch of grief about it. Well, come to find out, he was born with a condition that I can't remember what the name of it was, but he's basically born with only one pectoral muscle. So putting up 15 reps on the bench press at 225 with only one pectoral muscle is outstanding to me. This is a guy who he's got plenty of strength. His tackling's insane. I think he averaged like 5 billion tackles a season when he was with the Montana. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. But he was absolutely insane at linebacker. And I do have concerns about his coverage ability for the NFL game. I mean, it was solid for the level in college he was playing at, but that is a huge step going from his level playing at Montana to playing in the NFL for the Denver Broncos. So that is a little bit of a concern. But this is a guy that I would definitely be looking at to go possibly get as a late round pick, maybe as an undrafted free agent, sitting on your practice squad for a year or two and seeing what you'd be able to get out of him and develop with him.
Yeah. Okay. And you're absolutely right. Going from the Big Sky Conference, a lower level D1 school there's some good talent that comes out of there. I mean, look at Cooper Kupp. Eastern Washington kid, played in the Big Sky, one of the better wide receivers in the NFL right now, playing for the Los Angeles Rams, a guy that I fell in love with watching him because, my family is from Montana, so we do watch a lot of Montana Grizzlies games, and watching Cooper Kupp obliterate the Montana secondary time and time again, it seemed, was just awful to watch. Now, there's a question here I'm going to grab here off of Facebook from Blue Cyber. Are we getting any new running backs? Now, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to kind of plug an article that I just wrote today on the contract that Philip Lindsay could be able to acquire after this upcoming season, and why it might not be so smart to look at the Austin Eckler deal that we just saw earlier this week. So go ahead and give that a read really fast if you guys get a chance. Now, as far as the running backs this year, the running back market in the free agent, I'm not necessarily really familiar this year, but I know, Eric, you're very high on it in the draft this year. We've talked about it kind of at length. Obviously, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy that you really like. Cam Akers is another one you like as well. Antonio Gibson, the running back / wide receiver out of Memphis, is another guy that people are really high on, especially after he ran a 4.3940 in Indianapolis the other day. Is there anybody day 4, day 5 outside of those names that you would be willing to see the Broncos bring in?
Well, there definitely are. I mean, you've got guys like Benny LeMay out of Charlotte who can be a big, tough between the tackle runner, but he's got decent speed on the outside. Salvin Ahmed out of Washington. You've got Jermichael Hasty, DJ Dallas, Tony Jones. I can list names going on and on and on. They all bring the skill set that Denver wants from their running back to compete with Royce Freeman. Now with the Broncos, I could see them taking a running back somewhere day 2, maybe not round 2, but with one of those round 3 picks that they currently have. Maybe Clyde Edwards-Helaire falls a little bit. Maybe Cam Akers, who absolutely destroyed competition at Florida State despite the terrible offensive line he had in front of him. Those are options as well. And when it's all said and done, I think that to answer the question about new running backs, I think Denver walks away with at least 2 new running backs this offseason, one of them being a free agent to add some veteran competition for the Broncos running back group, and 1 rookie. I mean, right now all they have is Royce Freeman. They've made it clear that they're not going to bring Theo Riddick back or Devontae Booker. So it's Royce Freeman, Philip Lindsay, and Khalfani Muhammad is all they have under a contract right now at the running back position. As far as I remember, there might be a name that I can't think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I really did like Kalfani Muhammad in the preseason last year. I thought he had an opportunity to make the roster as a like a fringe. He was a bubble player for me, but still, I thought that he had a very good preseason play and played very well on special teams. I thought that was probably the biggest impact that he could have had for this Broncos team that last year. Now, David Cromwell coming back in. Thanks again, David. If the Broncos trade down from 15, would Jeff Gladney or Denzel Mims be a more likely target? Now, Eric, you and I are one and the same on the Jeff Gladney hype right now. I'm very high on Jeff Gladney. You are as well. Denzel Mims, obviously, we talked about him just a little bit last night and the potential possibility of the Broncos trading back in the first round and grabbing him. Now, if you had the opportunity to beat John Elway, which direction would you go? Would you take Jeff Gladney to pair with AJ Bouye in the secondary, or would you take the Denzel Mims to go with Cortland Sutton on the offensive side of the football?
Well, I'm going to take the cop out on this one. I'm going to say that it's very hard to make kind of a judgment about that without knowing how the board's going to fall. Because if you're coming up and you trade down and say, just off the top of my head, Denver trades to 25. Nice even number. That's 11 picks before their second round pick, or 21 picks before their second round pick. Sorry about that. And so it's 25. All right. How has the board fallen? Are cornerbacks still has the cornerback run started yet? If so, then I'm probably going to be leaning a little bit more towards Jeff Gladney. If wide receivers are falling a little bit, then yeah, I'm going to continue to look at Jeff Gladney. If receivers are going, then I might be looking at Mims. So it's all depends on how things are going to fall down a little bit, because there are a lot of talent that you can get at receiver and cornerback in the second and third rounds as well in this class. So it really does. It just depends on how the board falls.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. I mean, there's no way to really kind of project something like that, and both would fit. Both are actually both big needs for the Broncos, for this Broncos roster moving forward. So, I mean, I would probably lean Mims just because I'm so smitten with him right now. The athletic testing absolutely has me incredibly high on him. But I mean, Gladney would be a great pick as well. I love how smooth he is in coverage. I love his hips. I love the athleticism that he brings. He's a little small, but he still is very physical against the run as a tackler and also at the catch point in defense. Now, Lonnie Provost coming in. Excuse me if I mispronounced your name, Lonnie. What do you think of Eli Apple, the free agent cornerback from the New Orleans Saints, formerly drafted by the New York Giants?
I actually have been going back and forth about this, the idea of him in my mind a little bit. And just, I think it was actually today, an article of mine was released. It also came with a YouTube video, so you can go check that out on the Mile High Huddle YouTube page, about 5 options in the free agent market for the Broncos to look at. Pretty sure Eli Apple was in there. And granted, this video was done prior to the trade for AJ Bouye, but the reasoning that I had Eli Apple on it is that he's just a little bit inconsistent. So he might be a little bit cheaper. When he's playing at a high level, he is actually a really good corner in the NFL. You just got to get him to playing at that level consistently. And Vic Fangio and Ed Donatel, they both have a history of their ability to develop and turn around careers of cornerbacks and from that they get from other teams. I mean, Prince Amukamara is one that comes to mind with what they were able to do with him and his career after he left, I think it was the New York Giants, and ended up in Chicago, and just what he did there, becoming not the best corner in the NFL, but one of the better corners in the NFL for multiple years. So I wouldn't mind taking a shot on Eli Apple. I would be a little bit concerned with some issues about his mentality and his attitude and stuff like that, because there's been a lot of concerns. That was one reason why he was moved from the New York Giants to the New Orleans Saints. So that'd be one thing that I'd be a little bit concerned about. But he's a guy that I would definitely take a risk on, depending on what that contract is. Not a lot of money for it and a way to get out of it just in case, but he's a guy that's could be worth it.
Yeah, and I mean, Vic Fangio and Ed Donatel have a very long history of taking cornerbacks that have struggled and turned them into gems. Now, Eli Apple is a former first-round draft pick and has a lot of talent. You just got to harness that and make it more consistent, keep his head on his shoulders, and make him actually want to learn and want to grow. Now, Bouye Beast comes in, and he says, I don't want a running back until day 3, and then he follows that up with, I still think that it should be Frank Gore if we must add a veteran. Now, last night after the podcast got over, Bouye Beast and I had a brief discussion on our YouTube page, and I said that with the youth movement on this Broncos team at the skill positions, Frank Gore doesn't necessarily align with that. 37 years old, he's one of the greatest running backs in all of NFL history. But at the same time, with the youth movement that this Broncos team is undergoing right now on the offensive side of the football, does Frank Gore make sense to you, Eric?
Yes. And simple fact is you are a young offense. but you still need veteran leadership around to help the younger players. And if there's any player that I think that would be able to get the message through to Royce Freeman that, hey, you've got to put the work in, you've got to put the effort in, you've got to be better, it's Frank Gore. This is a guy who I followed his career for a while because he is one of my favorite players at the running back position in the NFL. I absolutely love him. I would love to see him in a Broncos uniform. Being able to work with Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman and whomever the Broncos decide to bring in at running back would be tremendous. He'd provide a lot of veteran leadership to that Broncos offense that is a very young group. I mean, we have a second-year quarterback. We have a third-year star receiver. We have a third-year running back in Philip Lindsay. Basically, our most experienced starter with the Broncos organization is Garrett Bowles. That's the most experienced guy that we have starting for them.
That's fair.
So that's the way I'm going is, I mean, Jawan James, yeah, he has a lot more experience than Garrett Bowles, but I'm talking about with the Broncos in that organization. And then Jawan James, how reliable of a leader is he going to be? This is a guy that last year he didn't want to play because his knee wasn't feeling right, which, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of issues with my knees. I totally get that. If you feel like your knee is messed up and going to go out on you, you're probably going to have your knee go out on you. It's just a terrible feeling when you feel like that. So I understand it. But you want that guy that no matter what's coming, he's going to sit there and just give it his all and help everybody else around him. And then Aaron comes in. Sorry, I'm very terrible with names, and I don't want to completely butcher your last name. Asking if there's any updates on Will Parks coming back. And basically the only update that I have, the latest I've heard about it, is that it doesn't seem likely. He has interest from about 15 teams from around the NFL that are very intrigued in the services, and that his cost could end up being a little bit more than I would expect it to be based off of what I've seen on the field, and it might be more than what the Broncos are willing to pay for a number 3 safety. There's a lot of teams that feel that he can be a starter for their defense, a lot of teams that feel that he can be a huge contributor for them. So I think that he's going to end up getting a lot more than what a lot of people are thinking he will.
Well, and that's actually a very fair point, and it kind of goes into this question I was going to pull from CC right before you did. What are your thoughts on signing Prince Amukamara and Will Parks to solidify the secondary unit? Now, as Eric said, he's going to price himself out of the Broncos range, especially for another number 3 cornerback. But Prince Amukamara and Will Parks, if they both did come to Denver, that would definitely solidify a lot of the questions on the Broncos secondary. There was a question up here that I'm going to go grab really fast from Matt Steeman on Facebook. Could Denver go Cesar Ruiz in the second round? This is the interior offensive lineman from the University of Michigan. A lot of people are seeing him get there. A lot of people are putting him, in their mock drafts in the first round in the mid-20s area. Now, Eric, is there any chance that Cesar Ruiz could fall into the second round? And is he a fit for this Broncos team?
Well, with interior offensive linemen, it's always hard to gauge their value because some teams, depending on where they're at in their process of being a competitive team, they may be willing to take a guy early on. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the Kansas City Chiefs looking at a center. And if they do that, then Cesar Ruiz makes a lot of sense for them. And that could be a pick at number 32 overall. But as for his fit with the Broncos, he fits in. I mean, he can do whatever it is that you want to do in your blocking scheme. He can pull. He can get to the second level and attack. He can do all of that. He's the best center in this class. One of the best centers in this class. I think he's still my number 2 center behind Lloyd Cushenberry, but it's more of a 1A, 1B kind of situation. But yeah, he can do whatever you want. If he's there at 46 and Denver decided to take him, I'd be ecstatic for it because he is such a good player and good prospect for the NFL.
Well, and especially with the Broncos potentially losing out on Connor McGovern. We've talked about him a lot on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. There is 2 holes right now on the interior of the Broncos offensive line. Well, kind of really one because we're seeing a lot of new stuff coming out of Dove Valley with the Broncos coaching staff really high on Elijah Wilkinson starting at right guard next year. So we might see that kind of play out just a little bit. And I mean, you and I both agree. I think a whole lot of other people agree that Elijah Wilkinson at right guard is a lot better than Elijah Wilkinson at right tackle. Now, Terry Randall's coming in on the super chat. Thank you, Terry, for the $10 donation. We appreciate you, man. Super huge friend of the show. We see you all the time. Mile high salute to you, sir. The latest NFL mock draft from Chad Ryder, and I just mentioned this to you earlier today in our group chat. The latest NFL mock draft had us getting Jerry Jeudy in the first and AJ Epinesa in the second. What are your thoughts? Now, we kind of talked a little bit about Epinesa last night and just the fit that he would have kind of in the Broncos and at the NFL level. He's not your edge. People, stop calling him an edge defender because he's more a true defensive end, 7 technique, 5 technique in this scheme probably. But the combine, the struggles that he had in his athletic testing, he was never going to test elite. He's never going to have that big burst. He's not that kind of a player. Very technical with his hands, very strong kind of a player. And honestly, if he did fall to the second round, I would be very surprised by that. Eric, do you think there's any chance that Epinesa can last to 46?
It really will depend on what he does at his pro day. If he kind of struggles there with the athletic testing and he doesn't improve the numbers, because I know that while he's not the most athletic, teams were a little bit disappointed with his explosion numbers, primarily that 10-yard split. That 178 was just a little bit disappointing. From conversations I had, they wanted to be about the low 1.7. So you're looking at like 1.7 flat to 1.73-ish is what you're looking at, and that's what teams want him to get down, shaving off about at least 0.05 seconds off of that time, which is a big difference for the NFL. I mean, a lot of people will sit there and scoff at those kind of numbers when you get that little or get that small, but it's actually a huge difference in the NFL. So it really will depend on if he falls coming to that pro day. If he does, and he's there at 46, I think Denver should run to the podium with that, because that is a huge pick for them. Being able to get this guy who was touted as a top 10 pick just 2 months ago, at 46, unless there's like no underlying medical or character concerns about it, that would be a huge.
It doesn't sound like there's any of that. It doesn't sound like there's any character concerns with AJ Epinesa, and it doesn't seem like there's any kind of medical concern there as well. Now, just a quick off-the-cuff comment here. What would you think of if AJ Epinesa did fall into the second round? Do you think that the Broncos would pull a trigger on a trade up to go and get him by packaging number 46 and say 83 to get into the mid-30s if he's there somewhere around like 34, 35?
I could see Denver potentially exploring that, but of course it's always going to come down to the cost. John Elway is very well known for not wanting to give up too much in a trade up. That's why Denver hasn't traded up all that often. It's not the biggest thing that he wants to do. So if AJ Epinesa starts to fall that range, I could see Denver exploring the phones, making calls about that. We saw that happen last year, or we know that happened last year with Drew Lock. After they traded down and selected Noah Fant at 20, they basically immediately started calling up, trying to get back up to get Drew Lock. So it's definitely an option on the table for them. And I do want to say that, guys, that we are running a little bit long. This is going to be not the final call for questions, but the second to last call for questions. So if you guys have them, go ahead and get them in and before we get out of here. But Buwana Beast comes in, and I really want to pull this question because this is a player I want to talk about. I would like Ishmael in the third for the Broncos from San Diego State University. Now, Keith Ishmael is an interior offensive lineman. He's likely going to play center at the NFL. He had a really good scouting combine. And this is a guy that when I first watched, I can't remember what defender I was watching, but it was a guy who was going up against San Diego State. And I just immediately stopped watching that defender and started focusing on the center from San Diego State. This guy kept catching my eye every single play. Big, physical, move very well. Just that kind of guy that you want in the scheme that the Broncos are going to be running. So if Denver can land him in the third round, I would be very happy with that. Would be a good pick for them to get that center that they could have at least for the next 4 years and maybe extend beyond that. But we just know how John Elway is about extending centers. It's not the biggest thing he wants to do. Wants it to be a very cheaper contract because he just doesn't see the value in paying them big money, which I agree with.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Matt Paradis, look at what happened with him in Carolina after he went out and he signed that big deal after having multiple hip surgeries before he hit the free agent market. Like there's an issue there, and I agree with it. Now it would be nice to have a guy like a Rodney Hudson or an Alex Mack, someone like that would be the long-term top center in the league. That'd be great. But the Broncos don't have that option right now, and there's not a center on the market that they would be willing to pay that kind of money to. Now, I'm going to go to a pair of comments here from Steven Daniels on YouTube. He says, we need the corner from Dallas, meaning Byron Jones, or we can take Slay from Detroit via trade. Eric, you and I kind of talked briefly about this with the trade for AJ Bouye and the potential news, the potential interest in Prince Amukamara coming over to the Broncos out of Chicago. What is there any likelihood of the Broncos spending big again on the cornerback in this free agent market?
Well, I don't see Denver spending big again on the market, either in a trade or in free agency. That doesn't mean that Byron Jones is completely off the table. I do think that Darius Slay is completely off the table, though, unless what Detroit is asking for drastically falls and the contract that he wants drastically falls. That was always the big issue with it. It's because of Detroit, they were trying to push for a second-round pick. And then on top of that, Darius Slay was wanting a new contract with the team that trades for him of $16 million plus on an average per year basis. I couldn't see Denver doing that. There was a lot of talks there. They were one of the favorite teams to land him. I think that AJ Bouye takes him out of there. But Byron Jones is still an option. I don't think it's as likely as it is seeing someone like maybe Prince Amukamara that we've talked about, or another mid-tier free agent on the cornerback market. Now, you pulled a couple comments, and there's actually a couple that I wanted to pull out. One of them is from Johnny Blaze asking, are the Broncos scouting the XFL? And before I get to the next comment that actually plays in line with this is, yes, every NFL team is looking at players from the XFL just as they were with the whatever it was, the AAFL or AAL, whatever it was.
The AAF.
AAF, there we go. So, yeah, I think that Denver is. And then Terry Randall came in with another $2 donation. Thank you, Terry, for that.
Yes, thank you, Terry. Appreciate you, man.
As we always appreciate him. And he asks about depth O-line from the XFL, possibly. And this goes in line with the other question about Denver looking at that. And I can see Denver exploring it because offensive line is one of the positions that it's hard to really develop and see where players are without having contact. And since they are so limited in contact during the offseason programs, training camps, and all that stuff like that, games is the best way to do that. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if by the time we're done, if Denver is maybe not signed one, but we come to find out that Denver was looking hard at offensive line players from the XFL to help bring in depth from there. And then Stephen Daniel says we need to move on from Ron, I'm assuming Ron Leary, and Bowles, I'm assuming Garrett Bowles. Ron Leary, they've already announced that they're not going to pick up his option. He's a done deal. He's out of Denver. Garrett Bowles, after week 10, whenever the bye week was, he was actually a top 5 left tackle in the NFL. And Denver didn't. There's some speculation that Denver did a lot to help him out. They really didn't. It was just Drew Lock. Yeah, he helped him out a little bit, but he only had 3 penalties in the 5 games that Drew Lock started, and just I think like 1.5 sacks total, like 5 total pressures ever since the bye week. Like, he was tremendous, and it seems like that he finally got things turned around for him.
Yeah. Now, Jeremy Bales comes in just really quickly. He says, how do you super chat? Jeremy, you have to be watching on YouTube live, unfortunately, to do the super chat. Just post a comment. There's a button you can click, and it will give you the option to do a super chat. So if you want to do that, go on over. We do not ask for any of your donations. We do appreciate them. Now, if you have a question you want to get in before we get out of here, we're going to have to cut this a little bit short here today, guys. We're running a little bit long. This is the last call for questions. So I will look for your name again in the comment stream. And if you have a question you'd like to get answered, then we can do that. Now go ahead, Eric.
Plus, one reason why we can't go a little bit long, guys, is my in-laws are in town, so I do got to get out of here and go spend time with them. So
yeah, and I also have it's my girlfriend's niece's birthday party today, so we got to be over there at about 6:30 or so. So we're gonna have to get out of here in just a few minutes. Now, let's see here. Let's grab another one really fast while we still have a chance. I'm
going to pull this one. Buona Beast. Is Damian Lewis, I think that is his name. It is. The right guard from LSU, an option in round 3. I think so. I think he definitely should be. He is a big, powerful guy that can move very well. He's exactly what you're looking for a right guard, and I think he's one of the better guard prospects in the draft. Big fan of his. I have been a big fan of his for a while, ever since I actually was watching Lloyd Cushenberry. I mean, didn't have my eyes keep getting drawn to Damian Lewis because Cushenberry is the better prospect, but I did notice him multiple times. I think that of that interior offensive line, basically, well, actually that whole line, period, I think that he is the second best prospect on that class and of that group.
Cody Damron coming in on YouTube. How do you like Javon Kinlaw at 15? And we kind of touched on this just a little bit, Eric. So I'm going to let you go ahead and just break down Javon Kinlaw a little bit and the possibility that Vic Fangio falls in love with him and wants to have him on this defensive line.
Well, with Javon Kinlaw, you're getting a pretty raw defensive lineman. The technique isn't the greatest, but the biggest thing that you want to teach him is when he beats the offensive lineman, what to do from there. There were some missed opportunities for sacks and other pressures and run stuffs and all this stuff like that, just because he just kind of seemed a little bit lost after he beat the offensive lineman for it. Big physical guy, 324 pounds, freak athlete, could just do whatever you want on your defensive line, can do it all. And just if Denver wanted a guy that Bill Kohler is going to go, they're going to say, hey, Bill Kohler, go coach this guy up, go teach him the technique, go get the basics down, go get the fundamentals, and keep improving him year after year. He could develop into a top 5 interior defensive lineman in the NFL for multiple years, and having him in a line that features Draymond Jones and then Von Miller and Bradley Chubb on the edge, you have a very dangerous front up. So I am a big fan of the idea of Javon Kinlaw in this Broncos defense.
Well, and something that you had mentioned to me before, just talking in our group chat, was the fact that Javon Kinlaw is such a freak athlete on the defensive line, and he is such a freak of a player for the interior of the defensive line. There is not another player like him outside of Derrick Brown who's probably going to go in front of him in this defensive line class. There is a lot of speed and a lot of quality weapons at the wide receiver position. So there's a possibility that if Kinlaw is the pick, the Broncos can still go out and get somebody like a Denzel Mims, a Brandon Ayuk out of Arizona State, somebody like that. Now, there was another question. I'm not going to go up and find it. Why is nobody talking about Justin Jefferson to the Broncos in the first round?
I've actually talked about him a lot on Twitter. I think it's more so been privately though. And the biggest reason why that he's not getting the big talk about it is because when you're talking about Denver, people are looking at for that speed element to bring to the offense. And while he offers good speed, it's not elite speed. He's not the Denzel Mims or even Henry Ruggs, who is a whole nother level than Denzel Mims. He's not quite to that level. And I think that's the big reason why he's not getting talked about as much. If Denver decided if Justin Jefferson was the way to go, I'd be all for it. This is a guy that can bring a lot to your offense just without that speed. He just brings all these other elements to it and would be a tremendous piece for them. Now, I do have another couple questions here that I want to get to. And the first one is from Jordan Johnson. Hey, Lance and Eric, there's been so much buzz about Henry Ruggs. Do either of you think Ruggs could be Tyreek Hill or perhaps better? And I get a lot of flack for my opinion on Henry Ruggs because people seem to think that I think he's terrible. That isn't the case. I think that he is more than a speed threat. He brings more to the table than speed, but I would like to see his route running be a little bit better. If he wants to be that Tyreek Hill level player or caliber player, his route running will need to basically improve quite a bit. His speed variation throughout his routes is kind of a concern because when you're sitting here and you're running full speed into a cut, then the cornerback can kind of choke up on his coverage a little bit and cheat the coverage instead of having to trust it. Whereas if you're running in at, say, 80% speed, you slow down to 70% speed, and then from there, you just immediately take it to 100% speed, as Henry Ruggs can, then your cornerback has to play you honestly, and it's going to create separation easily, depending on what kind of route you're running. So I want to see more speed variation throughout his routes, and I want to see the routes and the breaks and stuff just be a little bit crisper. I'd like to see a little bit better head fakes about it, trying to sell that inside move when he's really going outside or vice versa, and just basically bring it all in, because everybody talks about the speed that Tyreek Hill brings, and Tyreek Hill is very fast, no argument here. But the best thing he does that complements his speed so well is his route running. He is one of the best route runners in the NFL, and his speed is just a complement to that. And if Henry Ruggs wants to be that kind of caliber player or better, he's got to get that route running up to that.
Well, and working with Courtland Sutton, if the Broncos do manage to get him, working with Courtland Sutton, who is not necessarily a terrible route runner, but definitely needed some refinement in that area coming out of Southern Methodist, there's a good chance with Henry Ruggs that he can pick up a lot of those traits, because Courtland Sutton has turned into a damn good route runner. Let's just put it as it is. Brian Greenfield coming in on the Super Chat. Brian, we appreciate you for the $10 donation, man. Thank you very much. Not happy with the AJ Bouye trade, mostly because Jones is now off the table. And if we trade up to get Ruggs, I'd be really pissed. And CeeDee Lamb is my number one still. Now, I know that you have CeeDee Lamb as your number one wide receiver, and we did kind of just break down a little bit of the AJ Bouye trade and the impact it does have for the Broncos spending money. Now, Jones, as you said, probably not necessarily off the table, just depending on the market and how that dictates his cost and everything like that. But I do kind of agree with that. The trade does get you out of that cornerback market. I would have preferred to see the Broncos go and get a Darius Slay, but AJ Bouye is still a very nice piece. He's a very good consolation prize for the Broncos in this free agency market. Now, let's see here. Just a couple more, guys. We're going to get out of here really quick. There was one that I saw from Chris Clark on YouTube. He says, I've seen a lot of people mock us with Xavier McKinney, the do-it-all defensive back out of Alabama. Do you guys like that pick with us having two very good safeties already? Keep up the good work. Now, last night we had Joey Richards at JR Drafts come on, and he broke down his mock draft that he did on the Draft Network a couple of weeks ago. And we asked him, because he took Henry Ruggs at number 15, we asked him after the combine, who would you take, and has your decision changed? And he said specifically that with Henry Ruggs running a 4.27, he's probably not going to last that long. But with Xavier McKinney still being available, that would be the guy that he would go to. And the reason being is because he's not necessarily just a safety player. He can play in the slot. He can play on the outside as a cornerback. He's kind of that do-it-all chess piece that you can move around all over this Vic Fangio defensive front. Now, Eric, what do you think? Would you be willing to do that would you like that if Xavier McKinney was the pick at number 15 for the Broncos?
I'd be all for it. I know a lot of fans wouldn't be because there's all these other needs, and Nick Kendall is going to be super happy that I'm talking about this just because he's been advocating for this for a while now, and he and I have had a bunch of back and forth about it. But the way that defenses are playing in the NFL are changing. Denver's defensive base front is basically a 3-4 front, but it's not really. It's more of a 5-2. What is it? That'd be 5-2-4, right?
Yeah, something like that. 5-2-4 or
even a
5-2-6.
5-1-5, things like that. It's changing. And with Xavier McKinney, that you have 3 defensive backs with Kareem Jackson, Justin Simmons, and Xavier McKinney, that any of 3 of them can come down and take a receiver one-on-one in the slot. Kareem Jackson can go and Xavier McKinney can go handle him on the boundary. So it takes a lot more pressure off of your cornerbacks because you have 3 guys here who can come down and help out your cornerbacks drastically. It's able to add more versatility to your defense, giving you more weapons, giving you a guy who, with Xavier McKinney, that Kareem Jackson is 32 years old, that Xavier McKinney can come in and be that replacement for him down the road. And so I absolutely would love it. And Stephen Daniel says 4-2-5. Denver has 5 players on their front. Often, sometimes it is a 4-2-5. Sometimes it is a 4-1-6 as well. So basically, there's so many different variations that Denver has on their front. But yeah, Xavier McKinney just brings a lot of versatility to your offense, as well as giving you a guy down the road. And Brian Greenfield comes in with another $5 donation. Bouye is a number 2 corner now, so I think we'll have 3 number 2 DBs, and we traded a pick for him. It makes no sense. I actually disagree. I think that AJ Bouye in 2018 was a number 1 corner. I think this last year in 2019 he was banged up a little bit, and he did struggle some. But I think that the Vic Fangio defense can see him bounce back and play at that number 1 corner level again. He's not that far removed from it. I think that a lot of people are being a little bit harsher about his play and everything like that. He's 2 of the last 3 years, and those 2 years are 2017 and 2019. He was much better than Chris Harris was out on the field, and even in 2018, Chris Harris was just slightly better than he was. I actually have a whole breakdown about this on Twitter. But yeah, I don't think AJ Bouye is just a number 2 corner. I think that if he doesn't bounce back, then yeah, he kind of is. But even then and I think Terry Randall came in and said it, 3 number 2s is better than a number 1 and 4 number 5s, which is completely true.
Absolutely. Especially in this Vic Fangio scheme, this doesn't task the cornerbacks with a lot of obviously they have a responsibility playing in zone coverage and stuff like that, but it doesn't ask a whole lot. You don't need to have elite players at the cornerback position in this Vic Fangio scheme. Now, Eric, unless there's any more questions that you want to get to before we get out of here, I'm going to start to kind of wrap this up now. Guys, once again, there was one question that I can't find out where it's at now. But I was asking about why nobody's talking about KJ Hamler, and I just kind of want to talk about that briefly. I want to talk about it. That was a good one. That was one that I wanted to get to, and I couldn't find it again.
Yeah, he does bring good speed, as the question asked, and he has solid hands. But the thing is just his size. A lot of teams are feeling that his size is very limiting to what he can do for an offense, basically limiting him to a slot role that's going to have to rely on him not dealing with press, keeping him off of coverage, getting him off cleanly, which is just hurting his value overall. I think he's a very good player, and we'll probably see him drafted somewhere around 3. But, yeah, I like him, but it's just a matter of when are you going to take him?
Yeah. That's fair. Now Summon Fox comes in, Summon Fox 88 on YouTube. Eli Apple, go back and rewatch the episode. We did talk about Eli Apple. I saw you comment his names a couple times. Now, guys, we're going to wrap this up here. And as always, make sure you guys are following us both on Twitter. You can find me at Sanderson MHH, and for Eric at Erick Trickel. Notice the CK in his name. Make sure you guys are also following the show at DVDD_pod. We post a bunch of updates on that, on what we're going to be doing, introducing some new guests, some new ideas, stuff to go into the show. Also follow the at Huddle Up Pod handle. That is the Huddle Up Podcast Network, and that posts live updates on the show. Let's see here. Let me grab the other one really fast. Where is it at here? Oh, yeah. If you like this video and you like our content, share it. Please get it out there, share it on social media, hit that thumbs up button on YouTube, and make sure you guys are helping grow this show a little bit, get our content out to some more viewers and whatnot, stuff like that. Now, Eric, anything else before we want to get out of here for this evening?
Yeah, Brian Greenfield came in and said, versus Tyreek Hill, 3 number 2 is not good. Versus Tyreek Hill, number 1s aren't good. He's shown that. He's beaten number 1 corners as well. He's not a guy that you beat with one-on-one matchups. He's a guy that you beat up with your double coverages and your triangle coverages that you put on him, and getting after Patrick Mahomes to where he can't sit there and just wait for Tyreek Hill to get open. That's how you slow down Tyreek Hill on the Kansas City Chiefs offense. It's not with just one player. And Terry Randall, thank you for that. And we're glad you enjoy the show, man. We're always glad that you have us. Peace out, you guys. Oh, and
yes, before we go,
Wannabeast does ask, will we be on YouTube to answer questions? I am actually quite often. I will just go onto YouTube and just search the questions and answer you guys when I can. And next Friday night, make sure you guys are here for it. Next Friday night, 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we are doing another live mock draft. This is where, to break it down, if you guys weren't here last time, you guys are the general managers. You guys are the ones making the picks. We are your scouts. You guys are relying on us to provide you with the information that you guys may or may not have yourselves. I don't want to sit there and say everybody watches a bunch of tape or say that nobody else watches tapes. But we are here to add more context to the players and tell you about the players, what they can bring, offer insight to it from us, the senior draft analyst of Mile Huddle and another draft analyst from Mile Huddle. And you guys get to choose. You guys want to be
comes in and says, I get a super delegate vote though.
But yeah, you guys get to choose. We'll just offer our insights and you guys get to see how things turned out. And I have had a couple of people asking if I'm going to the draft. I am not going to be at the draft, but we do have something big and special planned for the NFL draft that will probably put me live in front of you guys for the whole draft, which should be fun.
Yes.
I'm excited for it.
Yep.
So we're not sure yet. We're not sure yet. Stay tuned for all the details. We're still hashing all that stuff out. But I won't be at the draft. I think a couple other people from Mile Huddle will be there. Just unfortunately for me, it's not in the financial planning that I'm able to do this year. 1 year though. 1 year I'll definitely be there. So it just says I'll be at the combine and all that stuff too. I'll get there eventually. But yeah, guys, sorry about rambling on, but yeah, next week or next Friday, 5:30 p.m. the live draft where you guys get to choose. Draft night, I think for all 3 rounds, we'll probably have something special going on. Not sure yet. We're still hashing out the details. Stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you guys for coming. We enjoyed doing this. Sorry about my rambling. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you guys for all of your questions.
Shut up.
And yeah, I'll hand this off to back to Lance. Thank you guys for joining us.
Hey, guys, thank you all once again for joining us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Again, follow us both on Twitter. Follow the show on Twitter. You guys stay safe out there. Take care. Have a great evening. Thank you very much.